The night was quiet, almost too quiet, as the ground was disturbed by hurried hands. A young girl worked quickly, her face streaked with dirt, her movements deliberate but shaky. This wasn't a stranger in the shadows, it was someone the victim trusted most. Just hours earlier, the two had laughed together. They were best friends, inseparable for years, bonded by secrets, heartbreaks, and promises of loyalty to everyone else. They were sisters in all but blood. But beneath the surface, something poisonous had been building: envy, betrayal, and a storm of emotions that would eventually turn deadly. The victim had agreed to meet, believing it was just another night with her closest companion. She didn't realize that this would be the last decision she would ever make. Later, investigators would discover how carefully the plan had been set into motion. The phone records, the text messages, the timelines, they all pointed to betrayal disguised as friendship. And when the grave was covered, when the dirt was tamped down and the silence returned, one truth remained certain: the earth keeps secrets only for so long. No one could predict what would happen when suspicion fell on the very person who should have been mourning, because instead of breaking down in guilt, she would smile. Instead of trembling in fear, she would lean closer, tilt her head, and flirt with the very detective searching for the truth. The story begins here with a grave hidden in the dark, and a girl who thought charm could outshine her crime. The next morning, the town stirred with unease. A missing girl, a family in panic, a best friend who appeared far too calm. Her mother's voice cracked as she told police her daughter had never come home. Calls went unanswered. Text messages hung in the void. Panic spread from one household to the next, until the missing girl's name was on everyone's lips. Detectives quickly retraced her last steps. The friend admitted they were together the night before. She spoke smoothly, offering details like someone reading from a script. She smiled at the male officers, tilted her head, and asked questions that sounded less like concern and more like playful banter. But detectives are trained to notice patterns. They saw the charm, the deliberate eye contact, the calculated giggles. Something didn't fit. Why was her demeanor so different from the others searching desperately? Why did her voice hold amusement instead of anguish? Meanwhile, search parties scoured fields, creeks, and wooded paths. Flashlights cut through darkness. Volunteers called the girl's name into the wind. At home, her parents prayed for a miracle. Yet the one person who already knew the truth was sitting across from investigators, playing the role of the innocent friend with a smile that unsettled everyone in the room. Rain pelted the streets when detectives returned with harder questions. The timeline didn't add up. Her phone records placed her somewhere she swore she hadn't been. Instead of faltering, she leaned in with confidence. "You guys really think I'd do something like that?" she said with a light laugh. At one point, she even teased an officer about being too serious, as if this were a casual misunderstanding instead of a missing person case. Behind the scenes, investigators compared notes. One officer remarked that she seemed to enjoy the attention. A female detective pointed out how her emotions never matched the situation. While others cried, she smiled. While others begged for answers, she flirted. Friends of both girls began speaking out. There had been tension, jealousy, and whispered arguments. Their friendship wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Some described a toxic undercurrent: envy masked as loyalty, rivalry disguised as affection. The pieces were slowly coming together. But what investigators didn't yet have was the one thing that could crack the case wide open: proof. And without proof, the girl continued to play her role, smiling, laughing, and acting as though she were untouchable. The break came when a small detail refused to stay buried. A search dog picked up a trail in a wooded area not far from where the girls had last been seen. Officers followed, their flashlights catching on disturbed soil. The grave was shallow, the earth unsettled, the silence heavy with finality. The missing girl had been found. The news shattered her family. Tears turned to cries, and cries turned to silence, too deep for words. The community, which had clung to hope, now stood in disbelief. But the most chilling reaction came from her so-called best friend. Instead of breaking down, she seemed oddly composed. During questioning, she asked investigators if they were sure it was her, and when pressed, she smirked, as though the walls closing in were nothing more than an inconvenience. It was here that detectives knew they weren't dealing with fear. They were dealing with someone who thought charm could erase suspicion, who believed that smiles and playful glances were stronger than evidence. But evidence always wins. Forensic teams began piecing together the truth. The phone records, the tire tracks, the witness accounts, they all pointed in one direction. During interrogation, her mask started to slip. Detectives presented her with contradictions, and each time, her answers grew thinner, her laughter a little more forced. What began as flirtation slowly turned into frustration. "She was my best friend," she insisted, but the words lacked weight. The room fell silent as officers studied her, not just her words, but her demeanor. It was cold, detached, rehearsed. The community, watching from the outside, struggled with disbelief. How could someone so close, someone trusted, be responsible? How could a friend carry out something so unthinkable and then smile in the faces of those hunting for truth? The puzzle was almost complete. All that remained was to place the final piece, a confession or a verdict, and soon, both would come. The courtroom was tense, every seat filled with faces searching for justice. The girl who had once smiled her way through interrogations now sat quietly at the defense table, her eyes darting, but no longer sparkling with confidence. The evidence was undeniable. Forensics, timelines, testimonies all painted the same chilling picture. The jury saw it, the judge heard it, and the family of the victim, sitting broken but resolute, demanded it. When the verdict was read, the mask finally fell. Guilty, sentenced to life behind bars. Her attempts to charm, to manipulate, to flirt her way out of the darkest of crimes had failed. The same smile that once unsettled investigators now seemed empty, a hollow echo of a game she could no longer play. For the family, there was closure. But closure doesn't erase pain. They would carry the weight of loss forever. The community would remember the betrayal, the warning that sometimes danger wears the face of a friend. And as the prison doors closed behind her, one final thought lingered. What kind of person believes they can hide a crime with nothing more than a smile? The chilling truth is she did.